I do want to get into it because one of the things you said before we started was that the main thing is the way we process stress.
Yes.
So do talk to us about that, how we're
Sure.
processing it.
Stress is normal. I mean, you know, we have these organs that are secreting certain stress hormones every time we are, in fact, you know, facing a stressor in life. It's the way that we process that. It's the way that we actually say, okay, I have a challenge, I have a deadline to meet today, let me focus and I will reach that deadline and be able to deliver. But tomorrow there are new challenges coming, and what we're not doing is, how do we de-stress? How do we take time out for our adrenal glands to reset themselves overnight so that we can actually face that stressor and do a proper job the next day? So it's all linked to lifestyle. We're not eating properly, so nutritionally we are becoming inefficient. We're not, obviously we don't have, the stress impacts on the way that the gut bacteria in our gut process our food, so we're not absorbing. So it's a multitude of factors all relating to the actual stressors.
And what was so interesting is you were talking about how this impacts our immune system and that we're getting all these chronic diseases that are not hereditary at all. They're self-inflicted because we're not living right.
Lifestyle, disease of lifestyle.
So let's talk a little bit about hypertension, high blood pressure. I was talking to you about that.
Sure.
And especially in the workplace, you do find it. You're finding people younger and younger getting it. You find people in the early 20s have got high blood pressure at levels that you would not be expecting at somebody of that age. So what is happening? Because we do know about this. We do know about eating healthy. We do know about exercising.
Basically, it comes back down again to the way that the adrenals function. Adrenals are two small organs that sit just above your kidneys, and they secrete this very important stress hormone called cortisol. As we become stressed, so the cortisol level increases. So the adrenals adapt and they secrete more and more. But like any organ, they can only secrete a certain amount. So after a while, they become what we call fatigued. There's not enough cortisol being secreted. Now, the first signs that people start complaining of joint pains, muscle aches and pains, that is when you know that there's not enough of this natural glucocorticoid, natural anti-inflammatory being secreted by the body. If it continues, they crash. And when that happens is when the blood pressure starts climbing, because cortisol is controlled by the secretion of another hormone, and the other hormone is in fact pushes up the BP, the
what
blood
is
pressure.
important though? Is it reversible?
It's reversible, totally. Good nutrition, look at the gut, supplement if need be, give the immune support. And my most important thing is create your space. I think we have lost the ability to take time out for ourselves and say, let me recharge my batteries. I need 10, 15 minutes. Be it exercise is important, but you also need to just, you know, take your mind, change the scenery. I always tell patients, do yoga, do some meditation, pick up a book and read a good book.
But people, this is
yoga.
what people are saying though. I don't have the time.
Well, why is it that suddenly in modern lifestyle we don't have the time?
Because the pressures are more.
The pressures are more. Would be a lot more efficient if we created that space for ourselves. We'd be able to process the stress a lot more efficiently.
What I found really interesting, and I think I mentioned this to you as well, I remember when I was in business school and one of my professors was just, he had done his PhD in Japan, and he was just talking about the enormous stress levels that the Japanese go through. And yet, if you look at Japanese men, their life expectancy is 90. And he was just talking about how so much of their time is also around de-stressing. Why don't we do that in some of our economies?
Well, that's the whole thing. I think in Japan, they've found the ideal solution, and that is the pressure's on, you create that hour for you to actually go and de-stress during your work hour, be it gymming, be it exercise, be it going to meditate, be it whatever you need. They have found the ideal scenario where you can mix corporate life, the pressures of corporate life, together with the de-stress, and they actually don't face the same problems as modern lifestyle.
But who's the onus on, who is this responsibility for? Because if we look at the numbers, not just here in South Africa, if we look at other economies as well, how many people take sick days off work because they're really stressed and they're not coping, and they would rather, you wake up in the morning, don't want to go to work, we'll call in sick.
Get a doctor's certificate,
and how much that actually costs companies, how much that costs the economy. So who takes the responsibility? Does the employee say, well, you know what, I'm really stressed at work, make a program for me to de-stress? Or does the employer then say, well, this is what we're faced with, what are we going to do to tackle it?
Okay, as far as labour law is concerned, there's no responsibility placed on the employer to provide that safe space for the employee. I think it's time for us to maybe negotiate with the employer and say, okay, we can see in this corporate environment or in this environment, your employees are now really showing signs of stress. The moment your employees are now taking time out, being ill, getting more and more, doctor certificate to stay away from work, that is the time when the employer should be saying, whoa, there's something happening in my company. So let me create a space for my employer, a weekend away, send them away for de-stressing to a spa and that type of thing. So I think it's not built into the culture, the corporate culture, to provide for your employee, but I think it's time for us to just start looking at that.
Well,
it's corporate management.
One of the things I asked you is, I've got a 7-year-old brother, and if I on the days that I help him with his homework, the amount of homework they get after they've had the 7-8 day 8-hour work at school, and how much they come back home with, aren't we already at that level, putting them under so much pressure? This is the society we're living in now. Is that not our reality?
It's a reality, yes, and I think it's very wrong. Why are we pushing our children at school to be 8 hours at school, plus giving them all the homework, plus expecting them to participate in sporting activities? I remember my days, we used to have 6 hours of school, stop at 1:30, and then sports thereafter. We were educated
and
the same way.
here you are, you're a professor.
And here I am, so education could not have been that bad. But no, generally speaking, I think we're expecting more and more of the people, more and more of our employers, and yet of our employees rather, and yet we're not providing the right mechanisms for us to get the best out of those individuals.
I have to ask you this though, have our priorities not changed? Because as much as I would like to de-stress, as much as I'd like to take that hour off, the person who's next to me is probably not taking that time off, and they're pushing ahead, and they're probably going to make it, further than I will. Is that not the competition, the reality that we're faced with right now?
It's the competition, yes. It's a reality that we've created for ourselves. And secondly, I think no two people will perceive that stress all the same way. One person will be challenged with the same stresses, and they will be able to take it and run with it, because it all depends at what stage their adrenal output is. You may be at the point where you're about to crash. They're still relatively early, where the adrenals can still adapt and actually deliver on those stresses.
What are some of the diseases that you are finding? We have talked about high blood pressure. I talked to you about infertility, that's also
infertility,
a huge thing.
Cancer, autoimmune diseases, digestive problems. I always say our gut is our emotional center. When we're excited, we have butterflies in our stomach. When we have something to deliver, you have a knot in your stomach. That says to you where is the organ where you are feeling that stressor. So it impacts on gut ecology. It impacts on the way that the bacteria are processing your food. So you're not digesting properly, you're not absorbing. So it's a multitude of effects. Long term, we see the disease of aging, the chronic diseases, cancer, blood pressure, autoimmune diseases, cardiovascular disease. It's now also related as a chronic inflammatory condition linked to stress.
But Professor, I have to ask you this, because what you're saying to us now, we're living in the information age. So what you're telling us now, we've heard from so many different sources. Why then are people not making the change? If we look at how many people still have all those diseases, still eating badly, all of that, why are we not making the change?
I think we, as human beings, we enjoy hitting our heads on the wall constantly. The information's out there. We're not heeding the information. We're not heeding the advice being provided until it actually hits you. Until that chronic dreaded disease actually hits you, then only people sit up and say, whoa, I knew about this, I've read about this. So I think the earlier we start educating the public, educating our peers, educating our children, what the value is of eating properly, de-stressing, making sure we can't guarantee the quality of our foods either. So supplement properly, prevent disease of aging. The sooner we started, the better for all of us.
Thank you so much for
You're
coming,
most welcome.
Professor.
Thank you
Fantastic
very
conversation. That was Professor Patrick Bouic from the University of Stellenbosch and Synexa Life Science.